And even without a lockout and or strike as of yet, this is damaging the league. This is fans are exhausted with it. Fans are exhausted with the players union and how they're approaching this and how they're acting. Some real low rent kind of things out there being said, put on paper, made a little more personal than it really needs to be.
The situation between the WNBA and its Players Association deteriorates with each passing day. What should represent an exhilarating period filled with player movement, expansion, draft excitement, and roster reconstruction has instead become a source of mounting frustration. Had a new collective bargaining agreement been finalized, athletes would be traveling nationwide for meetings, expansion proceedings would be underway, and supporters would be energizing themselves about their franchise's futures. The league possessed tremendous forward momentum stemming from Caitlin Clark's impact, overall growth metrics, and the lucrative new media rights package. Yet, even without an actual work stoppage materializing, the ongoing conflict inflicts damage. Fans have grown weary of the situation, particularly regarding the Players Association's approach and conduct. Some communications have adopted unnecessarily personal tones, with statements crossing professional boundaries into territory that seems remarkably unprofessional.
Now, there was an idea of a moratorium out there that would pause everything, right? During the until there's a CBA in place, if there is one, and that moratorium has now been agreed upon. The WNBA and WNBPA have reached an agreement on a moratorium for league business. Sources tell ESPN, Ramona Shelburne, who is a NBA insider, this is necessary because the sides have
Discussion had circulated about implementing a moratorium that would halt all league operations until CBA resolution occurred. That moratorium has now received mutual agreement. The WNBA and Players Association have reached accord on a moratorium for league business, according to ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, an NBA insider. This step became necessary after both parties failed reaching agreement on either a new CBA or extension by the January 9th deadline. The development just emerged publicly. The rationale suggests offering qualifying offers, core designations, or pursuing unrestricted players made little sense without an established CBA framework.
NBA insider. This is necessary because the sides have failed to reach an agreement on a new CBA or extension by the January 9th deadline. This just broke. It didn't make sense for teams to be offering qualifying offers, core designations, or courting free agents until there was a new CBA. Again, just like I talked about yesterday, I still think the idea of the WNBA teams sending qualifying offers out there was a good idea.
Because a perspective exists that league franchises distributing qualifying offers represented sound strategy because it forces players contemplating their actual compensation rather than fixating exclusively on revenue percentages. One fundamental issue plaguing current negotiations involves revenue-sharing demands that appear unrealistic, essentially a fantasy scenario. The distinct possibility exists that pursuing this impractical objective could terminate the league's existence entirely. Whatever advisors are counseling players on business matters seem to be steering them toward potentially destroying their own employment opportunities. Front Office Sports reported shortly before the moratorium announcement that the association felt the league's proposal contained extraneous language beyond simply postponing free agency. According to sources familiar with negotiations, the union sought removing specific language in its counterproposal.
Because you need to start having the players think more about their money, all right, and less about a revenue. One of the issues they've got right now with the revenue sharing is it's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream. And they could very well end the league over a pipe dream, something that was never realistic. And whoever is advising these players of the business side, the players are listening to them. And
every issue under discussion appears incapable of generating agreement. While they managed reaching this moratorium arrangement, the Players Association apparently insisted on modifications there as well. Frankly, the association appears overly sensitive about every aspect of proceedings, and the last thing circumstances require involves slowing progress to a crawl. That's precisely where matters currently stand. Monday afternoon brought the Players Association's response following last week's league communication. The WNBA contacted every team's front office, advising them they could begin distributing qualifying offers and core designations under the expired agreement.
The players are listening to them, and they're going to kill this business. Right here, this was Front Office Sports just a little while before this. The union felt the league's proposal contained unnecessary language beyond simply delaying free agency, according to a source familiar with the negotiations. It looked to remove language in its counter-proposal. I mean, everything that's being done now, they cannot make it.
Reactions across the league reflected confusion and frustration. Multiple league sources told Front Office Sports that offers would hold no meaning since players wouldn't sign them with an entire salary system overhaul under negotiation. The objective never involved obtaining signatures. Not yet. Not before CBA completion. The strategy simply aimed placing monetary figures directly into players' consciousness. Adam Silver made a wise decision. Kathy Engelbert made a wise decision.
Everything that's being done now, they cannot make an agreement on, it seems like. They came to this moratorium agreement, but once again, the Players Association had to make some kind of change in there. Let's be honest, they're getting butthurt in everything that's being done. And the last thing they need is to bring this thing to a snail's pace. And that's where we're at. On Monday afternoon, the WNBA PA received a response from the league. Last week, the
WNBA ownership made a wise decision by forcing players to confront actual dollar amounts. Lexi Brown and Kalia Copper represent the only players not on rookie contracts signed through 2026. Brianna Stewart, the Players Association VP, stated Saturday at Unrivaled, they might be going out because that's how it's written. Once again, individuals are making statements from within competing professional leagues. A thoroughly unprofessional approach. Stewart continued explaining there's consistent messaging across the association and executive committee, ensuring everyone remains unified and refusing to sign anything because signing locks players into those specific numbers. Everyone exists in a holding pattern currently. Under typical free agency procedures, WNBA general managers would have until January 20th for distributing qualifying offers and core designations.
From the league. Last week, the WNBA contacted every team's front office to advise them that they can begin sending out qualifying offers and core designations under the expired agreement. The reaction from sources across the league was one of confusion and frustration. Multiple league sources told Front Office Sports that offers would be meaningless as players would sign them with an overhaul to the salary system being negotiated. It was never about getting them to sign it.
Teams aren't expected sending offers as both parties continue moratorium discussions, which just reached resolution. This represents the first deadline where the WNBA and union confront pressure that begins delaying official league business from the timeline established in the current CBA. The league additionally falls behind schedule on when expansion draft proceedings typically occur, something Toronto and Portland desperately require. However, the expansion draft date isn't specified within the legally binding CBA framework. Then yesterday, Ramona Shelburne raised another complication. Arenas now want booking dates that WNBA games would have occupied. Players apparently aren't considering these consequences thoroughly.
It was never about getting them to sign it. It never was. It was never going to be until there was a CBA. They just wanted Adam Silver. It was a wise move. Kathy Engelbert, it was a wise move. The WNBA owners, it was a wise move. Put the money into the minds of the players. Lexi Brown, Kalani Brown are the only players not on rookie contracts signed through 2026. Quote, they might be.
Either that reality exists, or legitimate questions arise about how many players actually desire accepting the current CBA proposal. Genuine curiosity exists about the actual number of players willing to accept present terms. This league has documented history, extensively discussed history, of players bullying each other and treating colleagues poorly. So what happens to those players who want signing the CBA and returning to basketball? How will that scenario unfold? Reasonable belief suggests some level of intimidation likely operates currently within the union structure among members and players.
Bro. She beat out Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, and Asia Wilson. Sophie Cunningham did. Arguably a nice role player, bro. Now, with that being said, she's due for a major payday. She's been on her podcast. She said the next city she want to go to, she want to buy a house, and this might be her last little stitch. I don't know, but she's definitely turning into a media personality, and she is a free agent, unfortunately. Now, this article right here came out about an hour ago, man. So this is where I'm getting this information from.
Imagine being the solitary player or perhaps a group of 12 players expressing willingness to sign the new CBA. How will they be treated by their peers? This aspect hasn't received adequate discussion throughout these proceedings. How will players favoring compromise end up being treated by the association? This explains why the wrong individuals hold leadership positions within the players' union. They possess other considerations factoring into their calculations that don't apply to many regular members. Numerous players care nothing about unrivaled or associated business ventures.
It stated, Fever announced Sophie Cunningham move amid of WNBA offseason. So let's click on this. Let's dive into it, man. The Indiana Fever had a message on Sophie Cunningham. So goes on to say Sophie Cunningham had a memorable first season with the Indiana Fever in 30 games, played in the 6'1" average guard, averaged 8 points and 3 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 1.2 steals, and 1.7.
They simply want playing in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark represents one such example. This qualifies as disaster territory. It's officially become a public relations catastrophe for the league. Right after initiating genuine growth, this situation has turned officially problematic. The damage continues accumulating as negotiations stall and fans grow increasingly frustrated with the entire process.
1.2 steals and 1.7 triples in 25 minutes per contest. Unfortunately, Sophie Cunningham campaign was cut short due to injury. The 29-year-old tore her MCL in her right knee in August, forcing her to miss the latter part of the year. Now, Sophie Cunningham was one of about 4 players that got hurt for the Indiana Fever. It was an ugly situation, and pretty much the worst thing that could have happened to the team, bro.
The moratorium agreement itself symbolizes failure rather than progress. Instead of finalizing terms allowing the exciting off-season activities fans anticipated, both sides have essentially agreed to pause everything indefinitely. Meanwhile, the May 8th season start date appears increasingly untenable, expansion franchises remain in limbo, unable to build rosters, and the sport's momentum faces serious jeopardy. What makes this particularly frustrating involves the timing. The league had captured unprecedented attention and growth trajectory. Media coverage expanded dramatically.
And pretty much the worst thing that could have happened to the team, bro. Started with Caitlin and went all the way down the pipeline, man. Goes on to say Cunningham deal with the Fever was for 1 year. So yes, when Amber Cox did the Sophie deal, it was a 1-year deal. She is now set to enter free agency. Once the window officially opens on February 1st, the Fever will need to negotiate a new contract to keep her in Indiana for the 2026 season. Now, before we get into this, I heard
fan engagement reached historic levels. Sponsorship dollars flowed in quantities never previously seen. All these positive developments now risk dissipating because parties cannot reach compromise on terms that would still represent dramatic improvements over existing compensation structures. The longer this impasse continues, the more damage accumulates. Casual fans who became invested during the previous season may lose interest entirely. Arenas will commit those dates to other events.
I heard, because I still be hearing stuff. Y'all ain't got to watch, but it's cool because I still hear stuff. I'm still plugged in. But with that being said, man, Sophie Cunningham allegedly, the Indiana Fever front office ain't feeling Sophie Cunningham. They wasn't feeling the tactics she was doing. They felt as if Sophie Cunningham was doing a lot of bad press for the team. And me personally, I don't think Sophie Cunningham will be on the Fever 2026 season. I hope
the expansion franchise's ability to launch successfully becomes compromised. Most critically, the goodwill and momentum the sport had built faces erosion with each passing week of uncertainty and acrimony. The Fever has issued communications regarding Sophie Cunningham's future circumstances. The WNBA and collective bargaining entities established an understanding to suspend free agency activities. They're attempting to prevent ownership groups from advancing with core designation procedures, transmitting proposals to additional competitors, and essentially maintaining everything in suspended status. One prominent figure emerging from last season's WNBA competition was Sophie Cunningham with the Indiana Fever.
2026 season. I hope I'm wrong. God, please let me be wrong because she is from my home state here in Missouri. But from what I was hearing during the season, at the conclusion of the season, is that they don't really feel Sophie energy. They wasn't feeling Sophie energy like that. Now, I could be wrong, bro, but I highly doubt it. Now, the article goes on to say, Cunningham recently concluded her basketball clinic in her hometown of Columbia, Missouri. She has now returned to Indiana.
Remarkably, Sophie's narrative includes becoming the sole WNBA competitor ranking as the most searched women's basketball athlete throughout all of 2005. She surpassed Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Buchers, and Aja Wilson. Cunningham accomplished this arguably as a quality supporting contributor. Consequently, she's positioned for substantial compensation increases. She's mentioned on her podcast that her next destination city, she desires purchasing property, and this might represent her final major contract period. She's definitely evolving into a media personality and remains an unrestricted free agent, unfortunately.
Clinic in her hometown of Columbia, Missouri. She has now returned to Indiana as she continued to rehab her knee. So Sophie is still in Indy. I didn't know that. I thought she came back here, but she must have went back. Now on Monday, Sophie Cunningham attended a game at Gainbridge Fieldhouse Fever home court. The former Missouri Tiger star came to the stadium to watch the Indiana Pacers take the Boston Celtics. The Fever took to social media announced Sophie Cunningham off-season move. Sophie Cunningham in the house attending courtside tonight per the team.
Recent reporting published approximately 1 hour prior provided this information. The article stated, Fever announced Sophie Cunningham move amid WNBA offseason. The Indiana Fever communicated a message regarding Sophie Cunningham. Content explained that Sophie Cunningham experienced a memorable inaugural season with the Indiana Fever across 30 contests. The 6'1" guard averaged 8 points and 3 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 1.2 steals, and 1.7 three-pointers in 25 minutes per appearance. Unfortunately, Sophie Cunningham's campaign concluded prematurely due to injury. The 29-year-old suffered MCL damage in her right knee during August, compelling her to miss the latter portion of the year.
The team posted, so I'm guessing the post is coming up now. The Pacers pulled off the win, and Cunningham was attended. I don't know what that's going on to say, but y'all get what I'm saying. So the Indiana Fever definitely got to make some big time moves. But if you guys did not hear the news that happened yesterday, I was one of the first people to break you guys news about the story with the WNBA. We're going to replay some of that content, man. Peace out. Ona Shelburne, I believe she is a reporter for ESPN, senior writer for ESPN.
Sophie Cunningham represented one of approximately 4 competitors who sustained injuries for the Indiana Fever. This created an unfortunate situation and essentially the worst possible scenario for the organization. It commenced with Caitlin and progressed throughout the entire roster. Cunningham's agreement with the Fever spanned 1 year. When Amber Cox negotiated Sophie's agreement, it constituted a single-year arrangement. She now enters free agency once the window officially opens on February 1st.